So I want to take a minute and talk about the advantages and disadvantages of wet jack versus dry jack. So over the past year, I've really grown fond to the dry jack versus the wet jack. Now, the wet jack will always have its place, but I'm a dry jacker, and I'll tell you why. One thing that stands out to me is when you raise this jack here up, it's going to stay straight and true all the way up. Versus this wet jack, it's going to walk backwards. So many times when you're on an angle, you're actually pulling your vehicle off a jack stand. So I've got this trued up in the center here, marked on her hole here, and I've got this set at 17 inches. So we've got a 12-volt compressor here set up, and what I'm going to do is raise this up at the same time, run over there on the wet jack. So the dry jack's going to be handling its business, and the dry jack will be going. But look at this. Look at this. So we're jacking up comfortably here, and I'm chasing it up. But as you see to this point here, now it starts going array on us. So we just passed the point of threshold, and this is where if you're not careful, hey, you just pulled the vehicle off the jack stands. Because remember, we started right here, and we've moved almost 5 inches in that throat. So when it comes to this jack here, what you're talking about is a range from a low point of 5.5 inches all the way up to 18.5 inches. Now, the wet jack, you're starting out about 3 3/4 of an inch, but you're still going up to that 18-inch mark here. So that's a big difference. But another thing is when you look at the comparison of the two, they both weigh right at 50 pounds, but the difference is the tonnage. This right here is a 2.5 ton versus this is a 5 ton. So another thing is when you start putting a side load on this right here, there's nothing really to support it. And I've actually bent this one here when I was, jacking underneath the tree. So that right there is something I bought that lesson, and I know from moving forward, I've got to be careful on that side load, because once you do that, the jack don't always want to close unless you have to assist it by wearing out the corner of it. But this right here actually has 6 different cones shaped on the inside of it that collapse into each other. So when you drop the valve or the pop-off valve hits, hey, you don't have to worry about it, being all tipsy, because of those cones actually keep it stable. So when you look at these jacks here, you can get different handle configurations. You can get it in a fixed handle. You can get it in a stubby handle, the extended handle with the adjustment. Hey, you got different options with that. But the only advantage that I see over this, the wet jack over the dry jack is you don't need air to run this wet jack, but you got to service your air and your fluid in that. So when it comes down to it, if you're on the trail and you don't have a compressor, hey, the wet jack is the way to go. But if I'm in the shop and I've got my air hooked up, or the service truck, hey, you can bet this is my number one grab here. So that's just some of the advantages and disadvantages of the dry jack versus a wet jack. But once you go dry jack, generally you don't go back to wet jack unless you have to, or unless you're doing like a 20 or larger capacity. But this right here, dry jack, is one sweet setup. So you can get this in a 3-ton or the 5-ton model, different handle configurations, different weight, 3 or 5 ton. So 5 ton, 11,000 pounds, metric pounds there. Hey, this right here is one sweet setup. So check it out, the link down below, if you want to find out more details on the 12-volt compressor, and you can get that individually, or you can get it with the train horn setup with the jack, as well as the air hose reel that you can combine the two there. But comparing to the wet jack, I'm a dry jacker. How about you?